I stand depicted in an anime style along with 6 other guys. We face each other in a circle, and the camera slowly pans around each of our intense expressions in turn. Ben adjusts his sunglasses, and light flashes across them. You see my hard-set gaze peer out from behind a mask of wire mesh, and I tighten my grip on the sniper in my hands. You can feel the tension in the air as all of us wait for the other to make the first move. Noah's hand shifts ever so slightly, and everyone dashes into action. You see the world blur past me as I anime dash into the forest. I ricochet off the trees before launching to the side, my foot making a mini crater in the bark as I do so. Bullets speed toward me, but I backflip over the assault, and my feet lands in the earth. I slide sideways, my stance plowing the dirt, before exploding up the mountain ahead. Almost effortlessly, I launch to the top of the rock face, and you see my hand dig into the rock as I grasp it. I land an epic pose at the top before steadying my gun. One of the others rushes toward me at blinding speed. The camera circles around me as I load my bolt-action sniper dramatically and take aim. Pew! You hear the faintest pew sound, and from a distance you see a tiny speck fly slowly across the screen and gently bounce off my opponent. Yeah, I mean, as much as I wish airsoft were as epic as I imagine it in my fantasy, anime world, it's more like the latter case. Now, granted, it's still pretty cool. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of fun to be had, but there's still something desired in my airsoft performance. What usually happens is more like this. You see me flat out sitting, not even trying to be stealthy, out in the open, on top of a rock, unloading shot after shot after shot from my bolt-action sniper. After exhausting my ammo, you see me take a break to reload, and then going back at it. The world speeds past, and I am a mere montage of motion as a time-lapse format goes by. You see the sun draw near as the horizon begins to lighten with the dawning of the sun. Not the dawning, with the setting of the sun. Finally, after an uncountable number of shots, one hits. Yes! I exclaim before I proceed to pump my sniper over my head and give a poor imitation of a Tusken Raider. Later on, you see me talking with the other guys, and you manage to overhear me saying, I totally nailed Noah in the head. It was such an epic shot. No scope, too. Okay, maybe I'm not that bad, but at times, that's not much of an exaggeration. The whole thing about taking 10,000 shots and then acting like the one that hit was 100% skill is totally something some of the guys do, though. What happened is one dude would just lay down 25 rounds in a second, and one will hit, and then later he'll be like, did you see that time I nailed you in the forehead? And here I am thinking, well, yeah, you literally shot 30 BBs on full auto, so of course you're going to hit. But, oh well, just because we're not quite as epic as we imagine ourselves doesn't mean that it's not fun, and we can't imagine ourselves to be cool. So yeah, aside from airsoft, what have I been up to? Well, after the last live email, I went to a Halloween quote-unquote party at Neo and City's house. I put that in quotations because in the end, I was the only one that came. But even though it was just the 3 of us, it was still a good time. We played 2 games of Catan, one of which I won, and did some other stuff before I headed home and worked out in VR. An interesting experience, I must say. Here are Neo and City's crayon costumes, which I personally thought were pretty weird, especially given City's heavy makeup. Some female just needs to justify that to me because I do not understand the appeal of makeup. I'm going to be completely honest. On Sunday morning, I alternatively memorized philosophy and read the Bible for about 4 hours, though I did take one break to play this Ultimate Frisbee game in VR. It's imagine you're playing Ultimate Frisbee in Ender's Game training simulation. It's basically what I did. I then went to Neo's house for a typical Bible study that occurs on his premises, which was not eventful enough to write anything about. That was interesting. We then did D&D, and we did character fights, which was really fun. Neo sent 3 characters up against XA-12. First, an improved XA-12. And second, a special type of fighter called a Echo Knight. And lastly, a homebrew sorcerer. And XA-12 beat them all! Though I will admit, the last match against the sorcerer was a close call. So yeah, all that to show, XA-12 is the superiorist character in the game. But yeah, we did that late into the night before I got home. I stuffed my face with some cereal and watched a bit of anime before going to sleep. The next morning was the beginning of a great evil that came upon me. However, since I do not feel the evil sting until later, the precise nature of that email shall be expounded upon at a later time. Anyway, as one does on a Monday, I did school and went to work. The only novel thing that occurred in those monotonous tasks was Michael, a guy who used to be at work, basically when I first got the job. He came back, so that was mildly interesting. That afternoon, I intermittently watched anime and did some mechanical engineering homework before rounding out the night by recording 3 podcast episodes of Ye Old Life Update emails. The following was school, work, a tiny bit of Bible reading, and the plague of the postmodernist. See, it's bad enough the postmodernist just flat out exists. The notion that all things are, well, either are true for you or not true for you should be punishable by death. If for no other reason than to make such intolerable fools admit that there are certainly things that are objective. But to add insult to injury, and not only that, but this postmodernist is popular. How this came to be the case literally extends beyond my understanding. I do not know where there is a more stupid and blatantly self-defeating worldview. Even if it deserves to be called that, like a worldview. I don't understand. So, how on earth this came to be in vogue actually just baffles me. So anyway, in case you did not catch the vibe, I have a vehement hate for postmodernism. Hence, when lo and behold, a successful artist from California comes to dwell in our house and is a postmodernist, I was compelled by forces outside of my volition to rid him of this insufferable worldview. Now, you see, dissuading someone of radical skepticism is an art. It's a delicate and precise procedure in which one must first place the subject, must first subject the patient to a general questioning in order to ascertain his or her dearest views. Then upon doing so, one must formulate arguments such that their denial would demonstrably entail the denial of those principles the postmodernist holds most dear. However, if perchance the infection runs deeper than one first surmised, and the patient tries to, on the basis of scientific research, dissuade one of one's ability to reason accurately, then the time has come to beseech the patient to grant that at least the material world and science's conclusions are objective. However, if the infection runs deeper still, and the patient asserts the wildly improbable notion of a universal simulation of which we are all a part, or perhaps the favorite cop-out of the postmodernists, a multiverse, then there is still hope, as one can still rescue them from their insanity via morality. Even the most entrenched of anti-thinkers will still be willing to admit there are in fact horrible men, that rape and then torture and then finally murder young girls. And that is truly wrong for everyone everywhere, not just across our society. Nevertheless, should one be unfortunate enough to be tasked with the salvation of a patient who is willing to relativize even the most horrendous crimes a human can commit, then such a one has slipped beyond the reach of reason, and one must resort to the only measures capable of rescuing such a one. You see Alex maniacally grin and pulls out a flaming whip. As Avicenna once said, those who deny the first principle ought to be flogged and burned until they admit it's not the same thing to be not flogged and flogged or burned and not burned. Man, I love that quote. Avicenna was just the best. So yeah, as you may have surmised, I tried all the aforementioned techniques on this postmodernist, and he still refused to admit there was anything that wasn't mere perspective. Unfortunately, the last whip them till they admit being whipped is not the same as not being whipped was not really an option open to me. Aside from it being a little bit immoral, I probably would have gone to jail or something. So yeah, that doesn't seem like a desirable state of affairs. So yeah, I literally have like an hour-long conversation with the guy, and he's not willing to admit literally anything is objective. Not even that our perspectives are not numerically identical, which is literally the basis on which he claims the things. It was infuriating, and ultimately one of the most nonsensical debates I've ever had. Honestly, he was the first committed postmodernist I've met. The vast majority of people will at least admit that like the most horrendous immoral acts are not the mere products of social constructs, but he was willing to bite even those bullets to keep his postmodernism. In the end, I must say that an anecdote about Wittgenstein quite aptly applied the situation that I found myself in. I was like a parent speaking to a child saying, Timmy, say breakfast. And Timmy responded, can't. And then me asking, can't say what? And Timmy said, can't say breakfast. Though, of course, both the child and the postmodernist, they somehow managed to fail to see how what they just said could be problematic to their claim in the slightest. It was an infuriating conversation. That's the long and short of it. Anyway, after all that, and I purged the irrational toxins from me, I spent a good 5 hours of logical and rational conversation at Ratchet Christie. As per usual, the next morning I had school, then work, and then I went to youth group before spending a good chunk of time catching up on beta reading. I was way behind on reading for a friend, and yeah. And then I finally watched some anime. The next day was Thursday? Well, whatever it was. That day I did school and work before I finished my beta reading duties. Gosh, Steeler writes way too much. And then I did some Bible reading, and I got caught up on my podcast episodes that I was uploading. Friday, I got up very briefly around 8-ish for class, and then probably went back to sleep till noon, because I ain't getting up at 8 if I don't have to. I then uploaded YouTube videos, did homework, played soccer, and then rode in Ben's car all the way to Wyoming, where we had a mini vacations of sorts with the Macys family. When we got there, it was already pretty late, and Amelia didn't feel up for any good conversations, which was super tragic, as she said she might be down later, but we didn't end up having any. However, we did get to play some exploding unicorns, which was fun. I actually quite liked that game. The next morning, we all just kind of chilled before we went over to the aptly named Hobo Hot Springs. See, the hot springs were free, but the hobo part was not an exaggeration. Personally, I've never really seen the appeal of sitting in warm water communally, so I've never really loved hot springs in and of themselves. But add that to the fact that there are a lot of weird people awkwardly staring, and nah, I'll pass. But of course, I couldn't pass because I didn't drive my own car, so I kind of had nothing to do for quite a while. However, Ben, who did drive his own car, was soon feeling ready to go, and so we decided to head out early. So we drove all the way back to the house, only to discover, lo and behold, we had no key. So we drove all the way back to Hot Springs just in time to see Mom and Dad's car pull out, and we're like, well, they must have the key, so we'll follow them. So then we drove all the way back to the house, only to find Mom and Dad had also forgotten the key. So we drove all the way back to Hot Springs again, only to see the Macys pulling out, anticipating, they would drive straight home once we, left. We once again drove back to the house, only to wait like 15 minutes in swimsuits to later discover that they took the time to go shopping. So, getting back to the house proved quite the endeavor, though we did finally manage to do so. As for the rest of the day, it proved to be met at best. We played some games, watched a movie together, nothing really worth our time. However, late that night, I watched my first movie in VR, whilst huddled in the corner amongst a bunch of blankets, and that proved to be quite enjoyable, actually. I watched the first two episodes of the season 2 of The Mandalorian, and so yeah, the day rounded out. The next morning, nothing really happened. We just kind of ate breakfast, did a few games, and then Ben and me set out. Overall, the trip was pretty meh. Well, on the way back, I did get to ride in the back of Ben's car, and listen to music, so that was nice. So here's a picture of that. Boop. I then went to D&D at Neo's, had Bible study, fought XA12 against Neo's wizard, and got destroyed. Lame wisdom saving throws. Did dishes, and then played a bit of VR before going to sleep. The next day there was snow, but you were online, so there's no such thing as a snow day in online school. RIP. So yeah, did school and work, all the usual stuff. But as far as unusual things go, Grandpa came over, and so I got to let him try my VR. And he was super stiff while playing. I had to tell him to move his head around. But surprisingly, he destroyed all of us in the shooting game, despite the fact he'd never played in VR before. I was honestly super surprised. Maybe being like a really good marksman in real life helps in VR games. I don't know. So yeah, here's a picture of him doing that. After that, I had a long conversation with Matt and Alan where we began to try and make sense of divine simplicity and make it not sound crazy. So that was good. The next day, it featured school, work, and all that. But Rasher Christie was uncommonly full of people, and we talked about homosexuality and all the questions related to it. Is it a sin? Why is it a sin? How should we approach it? Etc. It was a good conversation, and I may have beat up a guy with my arguments. So that was fun. The following day, aka Wednesday, I had the usual, but on top of that, I did 4 hours straight of government work, so that was fun. After that, I decided that I'd earned some VR time and anime time, so I did that. Thursday, I had school plus work, and if you've never heard about it before, I also bought an ankle brace. Oh, I had school and work, the combo you've never heard about before, but I also bought an ankle brace, because ever since the soccer game some time back, it's been hurting, and I twisted it. And that night, I may or may not spent 5 or so hours trying to fix my airsoft gun. And here's what my bed looked like. I'll be honest, I totally failed. Though not for lack of effort, mind you. I was able to better seal and increase the spring strength, though, so hypothetically, had I managed to put it all back together at the end, the spring part would have been better off. But I wasn't able to do that in the end. So, yeah. I originally took it apart because the motor wasn't working, but I still have no idea why that is. But yeah, then when I opened up the gearbox of sorts to try and improve the spring, I stupidly just dumped all the random plastic pieces out, and I naively thought, oh, those are just the automatic firing mechanisms. No, they were not. So I spent the next 2 hours or so painfully and very tediously figuring out how they all went back together. However, I did actually manage to do so. So, ha! Take that, you stupid gun. However, after reassembling the trigger mechanism, I then discovered, lo and behold, the gun would no longer latch back after you cocked it. And I ratcheted up the spring too much. So I spent the next hour or so filing stuff down and fiddling until it actually latched. And then I find out it will no longer release because of the new tension in the spring. So after trying to make it work for a little while longer, I finally gave up and decided to build my own trigger mechanism, which, as one might expect, failed. It was at this point the continual just one more hour claim I kept telling myself lost its luster, and I decided, I suppose now it is 2:30 at night, aka in the morning. I should probably get some sleep. So I spent the next 15 minutes or so just trying to make my room livable again before crashing and getting some much needed sleep. Also, piece of advice, don't take apart airsoft guns in your bed because the gears have grease. Yet one more lapse in my judgment during this whole endeavor. Anyway, in the end, I didn't fix anything and just made things more broken. But nevertheless, it was the first time I really got to work on something mechanical for quite some time, so it was a valuable experience nonetheless. The next day, I woke up at noon to counteract the sleep deprivation aforementioned. Then me and Ben drove for 3 hours to try to find any airsoft gun to buy so that I would have something to shoot during the upcoming airsoft battle. However, literally every airsoft gun was sold out. So in the end, I just ended up awkwardly borrowing Sam Wade's sniper, which is actually a super good gun, so that was, worth the awkwardness of obtaining it. And then, when I got home, I intermittently did homework and watched anime. I was pretty stressed at that point, so I will confess I binged some anime before doing dishes, working on recording live emails for the podcast, and then finally watching the next episode of Mandalorian in VR. The next day I drove with Ben and Ben. Oh, I drove Ben. Nope, that doesn't make sense. Next morning, I drove Ben to Jack's, where we carpooled to the place where we were going to play airsoft with Deep Voice Noah. I love how that's become his title. I mean, I know I know 3 Noahs, so it's kind of necessary at this point in time. So yeah, the earlier Noah I talked about joining us was in some airsoft games. Let's see. So earlier, Noah had talked about joining us in some airsoft games. We were like, oh yeah. And that's how that came about, because we're like, yep, we should all play together. Ben has an interesting style in that picture. But anyway, we found some public land, crossed the river, and then hiked in this little canyon before going at it. And I must confess, it was pretty great, especially since I had a 450 FPS sniper that I could just outrange everyone else's guns. Here's a picture of me up on my sniping rock. That game got quite a few good shots off, though the only one I managed to... Oh, I was the only one that managed to be getting shot the whole time. Benefits of being a sniper. Basically, that's going to be a bi-weekly or potentially even weekly thing now, so I'm pretty excited for that. And I may or may not have to spend $170 on a good gun. Anyway, after that, I went to D&D, where we had this official PvP one-shot. And despite my boss' awesome strategy, still managed to lose. I think I would have won if we had more time, though. After that, we all just hung out. The next morning, I got some Bible reading done before going blading with the new wheels on my blades. I bought them ages back, and my old ones finally got bad enough I decided that it was time for replacement. At Neo's house, I joined in the typical D&D before having dinner and going to Bible study, which John, Neo's other good friend, stuck around for this time. We then engaged in some dishes, and I destroyed Neo and Sydney at Beat Saber. You're weak, and I've outgrown you. You see me laughing maniacally as I begin to leave the room. Also, props to anyone who gets that reference. Other than that, I think I played the Wii Tank game until 1 in the morning. That game is surprisingly fun, yet surprisingly difficult. Monday I had homework, all the school stuff. I got to talk to Matt and Alan, where Matt stretched out a pretty cogent view for divine simplicity, and that's a lot easier to accept. Namely, not that God has no potencies, period, but rather he has no passive potencies. Big difference. After that conversation, me and Joe met up at Wendy's, only to find out it was closed. Yeah, my bad on that one. So he came over here, and we watched a bit of anime together while eating said Wendy's. And, we just took a bunch of blankets, laid out on a huge tarp, and proceeded to lay out under the stars and talk into the wee hours of the night. I must say, it was probably one of my favorite conversations I've had in quite some time. And not only was it intellectually decent, okay, correction, some of it was intellectually decent, some of it was just Joe being willing to bite any bullet under the sun, but it was also emotionally good, in that we got to know each other quite a bit better. And all the fluffy stuff, I don't really care to dwell on. Anyway, it was a really good conversation. I encourage everyone to do it. Also, seriously, if you want to stargaze and talk, I'm totally down. Well, unless you live in New Zealand, 10 bazillion miles away, in which case you might just have to wait till I get there. The next day was pretty uneventful. Just school and work and Ratchet Christie. Nothing particularly out of the ordinary. Wednesday, I had the usual routine, 5 p.m. And then I went to youth group, and after that, I got to catch up with Jordan, and that was good. I also got to watch some anime and do some VR. Friday, I did a tiny bit of school. Yes, I mean Friday. So if you're wondering where Thursday went, I'll just tell you I have no idea. I then played soccer, which was good as usual. And after that, I promptly drove over to the edge of Fort Collins to fly Caleb's new drone, which is tiny, but still pretty darn sweet. And I may have not gotten very close to crashing it during the time Caleb let me fly it. Now, I will say that wasn't due to lack of skill. I'm actually pretty decent at flying drones, since I had that cheap one in New Zealand I used to fly all the time. It's just that I was flying it I used to fly my $10 drone, when I really should have been way more cautious, seeing this one is worth 50 times that much. So yeah, I flew a bit safer as the evening wore on. But anyway, we did that, and then Caleb came over to my house where we played some super hot in VR. After that, I had a movie night with the fam in Morgan. We watched The Edge of Tomorrow, and I must say that's such a good movie. I really like the concept, and I think it was really well executed. So you should totally watch that if you get the chance. After that, we called a family in New Zealand and caught up with them before heading to bed. Saturday, I slept in and spent 2.5 hours talking to Sam and clearing out the gutter and stuff for my parents. I then watched some anime, cleaned my room, before going to play what I think has got to be the longest D&D session yet. See, it was a one-shot ran by some of the people from John's old campaign, and while the story was meh, it may have involved a time machine when my monk character showed up in his true colors and took all the party's gold. So they may have spent the next 3 or so hours and using the time machine to try and catch him. And if you're wondering why that took so long, it's because, time travel isn't the most simple concept. Also, time traveling is philosophically stupid, just saying. Either nothing should be changed, or you can't travel at all. Anything else, and you get some serious philosophical problems on your hands. These are just the facts. Sorry, Doctor Who. So yeah, they eventually succeeded and murdered me. A little overkill for just stealing some gold, if you ask me. But it was a good time, and we stayed up way too late. Sunday morning, I slept in, as one might expect, given last night's adventures. I then proceeded to do government homework for ages before heading over to Neo's house for dishes. A few games of Pit, and then we played Small World. And I tried to use my character to fight in D&D, the one that stole the player's money, and I did abysmally. My character had, he just wiped he didn't wipe the floor. He was the thing that the floor was wiped with. The next morning, I woke up and drove over to Myra's house, where Ben did some nerf. Oh, with Ben, where we did a nerf war. We took a break and went and made blowguns because they're stupidly cheap and superior Nerf guns in every way. And then resumed said Nerf form, and it was really good. Once I got home, I talked with Esther about philosophical stuff, and though it pained me, I used baby words. However, I think she understood, so who knows? Maybe baby words are good for something after all. But yeah, after that, I watched some anime, did a lot more government homework before watching some more anime, playing Dutch with the fam, and then watching the next episode of The Mandalorian in VR. Tuesday, I woke up at 9 to help Caleb with the easiest and most well-paying job I've ever experienced. Seriously, this lady had us do like the easiest labor imaginable and bought us both lunch and then paid us both $150 for 2 hours of work. I'll be honest, I can't believe it. However, I have subsequently put $130 of said wages in my virtue tax saving account because there's no way I earned that. Anyway, after the super easy job, I then hung out with the Myers from 1 to 6 where I let them take turns in VR and I either played chess or ping pong. I was going to join with them for the dinner, but Benj timely reminded me that I had to get to Rasher Christie, so I promptly did that. I then dropped Grace off and rushed to Rasher Christie, only upon my arrival to eat copious amounts of burritos and have intellectually honest discussion of which gender was superior. Also, I regret to inform you that men technically lost. I'm not saying it's because, it was the politically correct thing to do. It's just overall women win. We evaluate the genders according to fairly, fair categories of like mental health and happiness, physical health and spiritual health and all that stuff. And according to our discussion, females took the latter of the two, while males only took the former. So, guys, I'm sorry to break it to you. We are technically the inferior gender. But we've got bigger muscles, so take that, noodle-armed female. Anyway, after that conversation, we basically just played some games. And then after that was over, I headed home. Wednesday morning, I went on a hike with Molly, Cable, and Alex. And that's the Alex, that's not me. We apparently went 8 miles, but it sure didn't feel like it. It went by super quick, and we got to have some good conversations along the way, and it was definitely worth it. I explained to them the merits of Catholicism, or Orthodoxy, but Cable was like the only one really sympathetic to my account. Because Molly, especially Molly, was just like, Protestantism is better. But yeah, after we finished that hike, we snagged some chai tea at Molly's traditional spot, and then she, Cable, and I went and shot recurve bows at the archery range, because Cable knew of a range. And I suppose if there's anyone that, would literally have a stack of medieval weaponry in his trunk, it would be Cable. After that, I introduced my family to this really random but funny game called We Didn't Playtest This at All. And then I drove all the way to Longmont to hang out with Liam, which was meh best. He's really into video games, especially Zelda, so that was basically all we did. And a lot of the time, he just played and I watched, and that isn't the most enjoyable of pastimes. The next morning was Thanksgiving, so basically the whole day was taken up eating food, playing games, and then watching a movie. Sadly, no good conversations were had, but, it was still a decent time nonetheless. Friday, I hung out that day, went to shoot some bows with Cable before going to Loveland Sports Park for some soccer. I then watched some anime before me, Ben, and Grace all went out on a drive and drove around in Ben's car and did stuff. We climbed this rock and it was pretty cool. Here's Ben's pictures that he took with his new iPhone 12. And then we found a place to park while overlooking the city and lay back in the back of Ben's car and just overlook the city. So yeah, whole trip was worthwhile. And finally, yesterday I played airsoft, which was fun, only to get home and find my new gun had arrived at that point in time, which was stupidly annoying because I was severely disadvantaged during the last game because it hadn't come yet. But yeah, this is my new airsoft gun. Woo! It's really heavy and shoots BBs at 410 FPS, so it's a hard hitter too. So yeah, that came, and then after that, the whole fam and I went to the Waves where we played some Catan, one game of which I have won. One game of which I would have won in one more turn, other than the fact that they all ganged up, and gave all their cards to David, so he won just because so I couldn't. And yeah, then we come to today. Today I worked on this Life of Demo, played some soccer, and then worked on this Life of Demo. Neo and Sydney are gone for the next few weeks, so thankfully this week was free, so I could actually get this done. I must say, at the start of the break, I was optimistic. I was going to catch up on all my history, philosophy memorization, catch up on my Bible reading, make a Spartan airsoft mask. It was going to be great. But then I ended up just saying yes to so many social engagements that I just didn't have the time. So I think the conclusion I've reached is that people are great and all, but I think I need less of them in my life. Or at least I may need to spend less time with less of them. I don't know, whatever the case. I need to do less social events because it's keeping me from becoming a philosophy genius, and that's bad. Nevertheless, thanks for catching up on my life this far and reading yet another long and lengthy Life Update email. I'll catch up with you all soon.